Hey, everybody. I'm Rob Nelson. What's the State of the Union? I don't actually mean the speech, the State of the Union. We'll get to that in a second. I mean the state of our union. You know what? I think most people right now feel like it's pretty effed up. I mean, you even have Michelle Obama, who's kind of got everything and seems like a pretty happy-go-lucky person, and why not? Going on her podcast and saying, you know, there's days I'm just so depressed, I don't know what to do. And she's not messing around. People are screwed up in their heads right now. It's a scary, tricky time between COVID and violent protests and massive protests and 38% of the economy collapsing and millions of people out of work. We're in tricky, tricky times. The State of the Union, forget about politics, is at best fractured. And the state of free speech, the dialogue, the basis in which we communicate in civil discourse and kind of the First Amendment of our country, well, the state of free speech is really in trouble. I'm Rob Nelson Live. I'm talking about it today with two awesome guests. Let's get right to it.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there. My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News, but news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake. You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the show tonight. We're going to have a wild conversation. And, you know, I decided I'm going to start it off fun because this is going to get serious. Right now, freedom of speech is protected by the First Amendment. It is not a crime to freely speak, with few exceptions. How long is that going to be the case? Well, let's start with a fun video where I asked people what the State of the Union actually was, the actual State of the Union, State of the Union. Do you guys know what the State of the Union is?
It's the... I feel really stupid right now.
Do you know what the State of the Union is?
No.
No. Nope. Don't know. No.
Yeah, well, the president talks about the U.S.
Who does the State of the Union?
More or less, it's the president.
But could be someone else.
I believe so, yeah.
Could it be anybody?
Maybe not anybody.
Only the president or other people?
Oh, man.
Like you couldn't do it.
Like I couldn't do it.
And how often does he do this?
Yeah, once a term, but I know he's given 2 already.
Is that because he's Trump? He's just trying to get extras in?
Probably.
Do you ever watch it?
Shit on TV?
No, it's only on Instagram.
Oh.
No.
No, it's big. It's big on TV. They'll
Black out the Super Bowl for the State of the Union? I don't know about that. Okay, if any one person could give the State of the Union, who would you want it to be?
Barack Obama again?
Barack Obama again? He wants 4 more years over here.
You.
Me!
Kiefer Sutherland. Because
For
of
the
his
State of the
role
Union.
in the show...
Designated Survivor.
Yes.
We are in a pop culture reality world. All right, that's fun, right? Nobody knows what the State of the Union is. For the record, it's a speech the president gives once a year, not once a term, and only the president gives it. And it's supposed to kind of outline the state of America. It's a hyper-political thing. Well, the state of America right now is a bit of a mess. So let me whip you through my monologue and then get to my 2 awesome guests who have a show called Bullet Point Nation, and they've got some stories to tell. But let me set this all up. When I say the State of the Union is a mess, obviously, you know, there's a whole lot of things going wrong right now in America. And that doesn't mean we can't make things better. It's just we're in troubled times. There's no question. We've never faced times like this before in modern history, maybe in American history. But when you step beneath the pandemic and beneath the tension and the so-called culture war, which, as I've said before, I don't think it's a culture war. I think it's actually something much more significant than that. When you step beneath the economic chaos that's happening, we're at risk of losing something really fundamental when it comes to speech. Something so important, our right to say what we want to say. So let me give you an example. Black Lives Matter. Right now, okay, America is a racist country. Racism is in every single institution in American society. There's systemic racism everywhere. There's racism in our criminal justice system. There's racism in our economic system. There's racism in our schools. There's racism in the NBA and the NFL. Racism is absolutely everywhere. It's entrenched. Certain people inherently have it. All Donald Trump supporters are racist, starting with Donald Trump. Many Republicans are probably racist, but heck, most white liberals are probably racist. I mean, racism is rampant. It's everywhere. And Black Americans have been completely, almost disenfranchised. It is literally, if you didn't know any better, you'd think it was as bad a time as the 1950s or 60s for Black people in America. And just a step away from slavery. I'm saying this to set up a point that I want to make that I think might seem provocative. By the way, I clearly have acknowledged that there are systemic inequalities going on in race. I think they exist in the criminal justice system. I think they exist in a lot of policing. They certainly exist, as I've said over and over again, economics. The economic inequality between overall whites and Blacks in America is massive. That said, and, I've had, the leader of the biggest protest in Los Angeles, the biggest Black Lives Matter protest, 10,000 people come on this show. And we had an incredibly great conversation. So nobody's going to look at me as like I'm some race denier. Racism exists. But the reality is we've literally made it like a mantra that everything is bad for Black Americans. So I'm going to point out a couple things that I think kind of set that off. And I can already hear people going, whoa, you're just cherry picking examples. So let me just say, having a Black president for 8 years, that's tokenism. Not tokenism. We elected a Black president to the United States, to the highest office in the United States twice. Now, couldn't have done that 20 years ago, 50 years ago. Couldn't have happened. And it'll happen again. That's not tokenism, but that's just one tiny example. Almost every single one of the most of, not every single one, a vast number of the highest paid sports figures in the world, and certainly in the United States, let's just stick here, are Black. And the most high profile ones are Black. And I don't care whether it's Tiger Woods, LeBron James, go back to Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, picking a lot of basketball there, Cam Newton in football. Heck, you pick the sport, except for NASCAR. Only Bubba Wallace in NASCAR. NASCAR might be a little racist. Again, I'm not saying racism doesn't exist. Two of the top 10 highest paid actors in the world are The Rock and Will Smith. Oprah Winfrey still today carries the mantle of the most well-known talk show host in history. Black people are in positions of power and influence across the country at the highest levels, not tokenism levels. I'm not saying it's equal for big corporations. No, there's still more white people in general and white men in general, but an enormous number, whether it's in the military, whether it's the chiefs of staffs, generals. How about police forces? 1/3 of all U.S. police forces, of the 100 largest police forces in the United States, have Black police chiefs. That's not tokenism. Almost 13% of Congress is made up, not Senate, Congress, the People's House, is made up of Black people, Black Congress people. There are 13% of the US is Black. So by proportion, that's an actual even proportion. That's not tokenism. That's not like a throwaway, a token person. That's not the Jeffersons on television. Speaking of which, how many of the top television shows are either Black storyline driven or led by a Black leading cast member? Right? Think about that. And again, make a whole giant list. From Empire to, God Friended Me to, God, I can't even keep track of all the shows. How about Bob? What is it? Bob Hearted. I don't watch it. It's on CBS. Bob Hearted Abisla, where the white dude falls in love with the Nigerian woman who comes to the U.S. I mean, again, culture, music. Again, not just Kanye West. He's token because he's a Republican. It's across the board. Black people have made enormous strides in advancement across the board in every single institution. Again, I'm not saying there's not racism. I'm not saying there's not inequalities, especially with the economic inequalities, especially with the most impoverished communities in the biggest cities in America, predominantly Black. Black poverty is a problem. The problem in pre-college education in K through 12 with Black kids is way worse than it is with white kids overall. But to say Black people have gone nowhere, have made no advancements, or it's just tokenism and racism exists in every single institution, it's actually not true. And find me a Black person who'd rather be alive 25 years ago or 50 years ago, 25, 50, that say things aren't overall better. So again, it's not one tiny throwaway. It's not the Jeffersons. It's a widespread, dominant That says something about racism. Yet, you would think we are in a completely racist society where every single institution is racist. It doesn't just end with Black Lives Matter. And by the way, I'm not knocking Black Lives Matter. I've been the guy who always said, I'd rather be white than black and driving in a car. But to suggest that all police are corrupt or hate black people doesn't really fit when a third of the 100 biggest police forces in America are run by black police officers, black chiefs. And there's a very high percentage of black police officers in the U.S. police force overall, more than their 13%. This comes true with everything. This isn't just true about blacks. This is, and Black Lives Matter and black and white. This is true about COVID. If you say the wrong thing about COVID, if you don't buy the certain line about it, yes, it's an infectious disease, terribly infectious disease. It's like a super flu. But I've always said there's a reason why most people don't know someone who died of COVID. I know some people who've had it. A lot of people know someone who's had it, and there's tons of people who've had it we don't even know because they didn't have symptoms. Most people don't know someone who died, and the reason for that is as horrible as 160,000 deaths is, and it's horrible, that's a tiny percentage of the U.S. population. I'm not good at math, but think about it. It's 350 million people. It's got to be like 1/20th of a percent. That's why most people don't know. Doesn't mean it's not a problem. Doesn't mean it's not bad, but you cannot say, I don't believe this is as bad as they're saying, or I don't believe it's okay. I believe it's okay for us to go out and not wear masks. And, oh no, you are now a mask denier. Same with vaccinations. You're a vaccine denier. And the problem is up till now, if you said those things, you get shut down. You might get canceled if you're a celebrity. You might get hated by your friends or disowned on Facebook. But we're reaching a point where I'm not sure you even have the right to say certain things anymore. But pretty soon they're going to just say it's illegal. It's illegal to say. We're on the fence of that. And my next two guests have a little experience with that. They host a show called Bullet Point Nation. Judd Dunning and Mike. Now, you're never supposed to stumble when you talk about your guests. And Michael Loftus. Judd had a show called Conservatively Unplugged. He's got a new book coming out called 13 and a Half Reasons Not to Be a Liberal on Newsmax. He's a commentator. He's a host. And he organized one of the first kind of COVID protests in LA where people drove around in cars. So the anti-COVID protest, I guess you would say. He can describe it himself. Michael has been a writer for years, wrote for some big shows, Charlie Sheen's Anger Management. I think he wrote for a CBS show. It wasn't all about Raymond. He'll tell me. Again, you're not supposed to forget Everybody Loves Raymond. It's not that. I'll remember what it is. It was like the Friends knockoff. He's also had I think he's had his own Comedy Central special. He's a frequent guy on Fox News, on Dana Perina's show, on The Five, I think on Fox and Friends in the morning. And he did a stand-up tour sort of post-COVID. He also did a show on Fox Nation, right? Sort of the first live streamed comedy show. And had a stand-up tour, two stand-up tours, I believe, called Freedom to the Deplorable Tour and Freedom to Something. He's going to tell me. This is, again, I've mangled this introduction, but these guys are really provocative thinkers and speakers. And they've been right in the heat of being shadowbaned, shut down. They've had experience. And again, they're not Nazis. And even if they were, I believe Nazis have a right to say what they want to say. I've always said the best answer to speech is more speech, not less speech. Silencing racists doesn't make racists go away. But these guys aren't racists. They're just people who don't toe the exact line that the left has reinforced over and over again. So everybody watching this, Judd and Michael, thanks for being here. Thanks for being on my show today. George,
Michael,
I've some of your intro there.
I've had
Freedom
some
to
great
laugh. I got it. Freedom to laugh.
Yes.
What's that?
Freedom to laugh. And the TV show
I got it.
with Can Wait on CBS, the George Lopez show on ABC. So,
right.
But that's not important. That's not important.
No.
Michael's resume
But
is
you
so
have
long.
Hollywood
I
friends
made
which people like.
Yes.
What's that,
Yeah.
Jed?
I said his resume is so long, I continually mangle it. So you join the crowd, Rob.
You know what? I've never been big on it because I don't have a teleprompter here. It's just, doing it from inside my head. My memory's probably getting a little faulty. Let me, guys, before we jump into it, let me just show a short clip of you guys on your Bullet Point Nation show. It's just like a minute of you two setting up the show, but fun for people to see.
They want you to think the world's gone crazy. They want you to think we're going to HE double hockey sticks in a handbasket, but we're not, because you guys watch Bullet Points with me and that guy.
Judd Dunning.
Boom! Informed, entertaining. You know what, Judd? Do you have a graphics package lying around?
You want to do some graphic package before the bullet points, or should we do the bullet points first and then a graphics package?
See, this is why you're the director. Here's a little tease of what's going on. We've got a bunch of big stories. We're going to cover them all. And what's bullet point number 1?
Bullet point number 1, thank you, producers. What else happened during the riots that you weren't supposed to pay attention to?
I like that. Bullet point number 2.
The George Floyd riots go on. Who are the real racists?
Ooh, I want to know. Bullet point number 3.
A COVID virtual reality check.
I'm into that. Bullet point number 4.
Chaz is full of spaz. Mongols and angels are on the roll.
Now, is there one more bullet point, or are we on to our wild card?
We are on to our wild card.
Woo! I'm ready for a wild card. Now, you tell me, do you have a graphics thing you want to throw up now?
Yes, I do. Run it.
Fantastic.
All right, you guys, thanks for sharing that. Just a little fun. Obviously, not you guys in the heat of your stuff, but kind of setting up the show and what you do and judge your book. So either one of you guys jump in. I like this just to be a fun conversation. You guys have said some things that have clearly provoked people, and you're conservatives, both of you. So just take a second. You know, I'll start with you, Michael. Share your experience as you've been a conservative and been in the media for a while. Been in, you know, obviously as a writer in Hollywood, a stand-up. What's your experience been, say, the past compared to more recently?
Well, this is just coming from my television writing background. When I started off writing on the George Lopez show for ABC, you always know there's constraints. You can't just say anything. You'll lose advertisers. They'll drop out. So you always got to play kind of between the lines. Things have gone downhill so fast it's hard to be believed. If you mention the name Trump, the AI from Facebook is going to hear it. The AI from YouTube, you're immediately going to be demonetized. There's certain words and phrases you just don't dare mention, because now we've moved beyond. You know, the old thing was you can't yell fire, you know, in a movie theater because people will get hurt and you've been faking them out. But now you can't say words because it'll hurt someone's feelings, and they'll complain and there'll be boycotts. And when you give an inch to this, they take a mile. And right now we're still in the middle of the avalanche. We are still in the middle of the avalanche, and it hasn't stopped yet. And for some people it has. When you dig in, like Bill Burr does a great job on stage. Comedians have it a little bit easier. But on a platform like this, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, they'll just pull the plug. You'll just be gone. You'll be deplatformed.
Is it really true, Judd, what Michael's saying? Have you experienced that? I mean, I think a lot of people sort of sense it, and conservatives may say it's true, but you know, you get a lot of backlash for people saying, yeah, you know what? And of course, the platforms come out and say, we don't pick between conservatives and liberals. Our algorithms are neutral. We're not, you know, again, you can show them all the examples, but the argument, you guys are just kind of reacting because you have the less popular opinion, which is debatable right there, but that you've experienced and seen how algorithms have played against you, or stories have gotten dumped down in the Google search or what have you.
Look, you talked about Nazis, right? I'll tell you what the new book burning is. The new book burning is censorship in the big tech platforms. And I think what we're going to see is this is going to get broken up soon. There's no way we're going to control the media the way we are. If we are, then freedom of speech is dead. There's a reason that the Second Amendment follows the First, because at this point, I mean, people are shutting us down. As far as our show goes, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Michael and I would mount thousands of views. We'd get shadow banned. We'd go to 2 views. Now, let me tell you how that relates to me as a business person. As a business person over 3 or 4 shows, I don't know, we probably spent 6 figures. We're probably about $100,000 into 4 or 5 years of shows. And suddenly the revenue streams are just gone because somebody with an algorithm and also on the marketing side. So when we went to market our show, it was right after the Mueller report came out. They asked for my passport. They asked for my address. They asked for my driver's license. I reapplied. And then we've had 70 episodes, Michael, and we're at probably 78 rejections for marketing. And you said this thing, who are we? We're really interested in a conversation with both sides.
Right. So what is it that's happening? So if I look at you guys, right, you don't come off right now as you're saying anything that, controversial. I mean, again, I get that you're more right of center than left of center, but what are some things you guys talk about or say that really trigger that? It's not just saying I support Trump, right? Obviously, a lot of people support Trump. He became president.
Yes.
What is it?
It is exactly that simple. It is exactly that simple. I like President Trump. I support his policies. That's it. That's all you have to say. They will dial down the results. You will get less views on Facebook. You will not be allowed to advertise on Facebook. They will keep your stream. Your posts won't reach as many people. It's as simple as that. I like Trump. Boom. Done.
And that's what we call shadow banning, right?
Yes. That's
shadow banning. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say.
No, I was just going to say that's called shadow banning.
Yeah, you can't check. Listen, Facebook or Twitter or any one of these platforms, they could just lie to us. That's what they should do. They should build in a secondary algorithm that goes, wow, you got 1 million views on that last one. You're doing great. And then you'd never suspect a thing. But it's like, wow, when I'm just telling jokes and doing stand-up, my post will reach 80,000, 100,000, 200,000 people. But if I go, wow, Trump did a really good deal, they're like, man, that post, it only went to 125. That's weird. I wonder where all your friends went.
Yeah. There's a Twitter purge today. If you look at Twitter's trending right before the show, I was just checking out the news, and there were like 10 people. I just lost 3,000 followers. I lost 4,000. I mean, there's currently purges going on in cycles. But Michael's actually exactly right. Like, I went to a social media specialist and they said, hey, yeah, you can't say your politics. You can't say that you're conservative. You can't say you're Trump. So there's actually a great show that we follow called Edge of Wonder. And so Edge of Wonder now uses like words for different meanings in code. And then they have a private pay channel. So they're forcing people, freedom of speech is they're forcing people underground. And you know what that's creating? You were talking about systematic racism or clumping the natural part. I don't think there's institutional racism anymore. We'll talk about that later in the show. But it's forcing people into their own kind as well. It's making it worse. It's not opening up the conversation. It's driving it apart.
Yeah. So when you say, let's jump right into that. When you say, I don't think there's institutional racism, you don't think there's systemic racism or institutional racism?
I did not say I didn't think there was systemic. Look, man, I'm a big David Webb, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell, Shelby Steele. There's a lot of Candace Jones, a lot of really intelligent people. And what I'm interested in is the Constitution and the way that legislation affects our choices. And if you go back to 1962, when we pulled we pulled religion out of schools, suddenly the black community goes from 85% fathers to 15% fathers today. There are elements in our society that have rolled forward. There have been entitlement incentives for black people to get used mostly by, I'd say, white. This is something we talk about on the show. There's a lot of white elitist liberals behind Black Lives Matter using their conflict for political goals. We'll talk about the truth of history and policy, how it relates to some of these disparities. But nobody's saying that there isn't actual racism that exists in pockets of individual choice and liberty. But look, gay marriage is legal now. When that went through, everybody's like, hey, it's over, it's done. the Me Too movement went through. It was extreme for a while. It pulled back. This was a course correction, which is fine if there's a course correction for more racial awareness.
Yeah,
because hijacked, Rob.
I don't know about that. I don't know. Listen, I've gone on the back and forth on this. I'm not sure we are just in a course correction, and that's what scares me. By the way, interesting, Me Too kind of canceled itself, which is funny because, it was literally everyone was Me Too. And there was a lot of hypocrisy in that as well. People who were you saw it with the Kavanaugh hearings and all that. But the truth is it was a needed movement to create awareness. And I think the media just dropped it like a hot potato because it suddenly stopped being, one, it wasn't getting them enough clicks. You had the, producer for Lawrence O'Donnell show on MSNBC who, resigned last week and said the news at MSNBC isn't being driven by the news. It's being driven by Twitter. And she's a conservative, a liberal. She hates Donald Trump. She's like, we follow clicks. We follow what's going to rate most, not what's actually. So I think Me Too stopped rating as much. And a lot of liberals started to be getting hit by Me Too. So I feel like celebrities who are only into it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Michael. You hit upon it. Joe Biden is running for president, and there's a woman who said he raped her. That'll end the Me Too movement. It's all big picture, man.
No, it's coming. It's coming back because somebody today came out that Trump raped somebody. So now Me Too will trend back. Now watch. Now that Trump's involved in an accusation, it's coming back.
Well, there's been a double standard around all this stuff. There's no question. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on that because I think there's no question there's a media double standard. The majority of the media is left, not right. And so you're going to always have a double standard. The fact that journalism's dead and that, people literally just, the narrative no longer is determined by what's happening. The narrative determines what they say is happening. That's troubling. But when you say this whole thing is a course correction, Judd, I'm worried that it's not. I'm worried that we're on the edge of kind of reaching a point where unconsciously people start simply thinking and you get it in your head. You can't say or think certain things. And years ago when I was in my early 20s, I went to China, and it was before China had just begun to open up. And that's what China was like. It was literally like people were in thought control. It was starting to break, but they literally weren't allowed to say or think certain things. And if they did, they'd get in trouble for it. And it carried beyond the law. It carried into how people operated sort of with their friends and their family. And it scares me that we're hitting that point where it's not just about a correction. It's about people are stopping to think, no longer thinking for themselves, and just buy whatever the narrative is. And then the institutions reinforce you have to say that narrative. And corporations want to make money, so they jump on that narrative. All these big companies that suddenly went all crazy with their BLM stuff weren't doing it because they believed they're doing it because they wanted to make sure they were in the right bed with consumers.
Yeah.
My view.
Yeah, it's funny. It's, China has their own little social credit system. They've got the security cameras set up. You spit on the sidewalk, you're going to lose so many social credit points, and that's going to affect the way you're allowed to travel, and it affects your real life. So Big Brother's always watching, and you have a social credit score. America, it's almost more insidious here because it's happening to us, but right now it's not Big Brother. It's like these private entities. Don't say this on Twitter, you'll get kicked off. Don't say this on Facebook, or you're going to lose friends and you'll get kicked off. So there's all this really bizarre self-censorship now. And when corporations are celebrating and raising money for something as absurd as Black Lives Matter, which has Marxist roots. The people, two of the founders of Black Lives Matter are trained Marxists, and they're talking about Black Lives Matter, but it's just police brutality. But we want to defund the police. Crime is on the rise. Blacks are being killed left and right in Chicago, but they don't matter. We need to tear down these statues. Black Lives Matter. That's a very, very interesting little organization there that they don't seem to care about Black lives.
Yeah. Well, right. And again, I'm going to push back a little on that in that, I don't like the fact that people, and I'm not saying you're wrong, Michael, but people say they like to go Black Lives Matter's Marxist. And again, I'm not going to argue. I've heard other people say what you're saying, that there's, some of the founders are in it, but I don't think most people behind Black Lives Matter give a crap about that. They really believe that it's about, well, I say that I don't know what people believe, but it's been but it's not. I don't believe it's an agenda to really create socialism in America. I think it's something. I think there's a censorship of thought, and people get on a bandwagon, and that bandwagon is, like I said in the opening of the show, it doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter. Now the narrative is black people are getting screwed by white people. And that's, to me, scary if you look at it and go, in some cases, but in many cases not. And this is a radically different world than we were in even 10 years ago. And people can't acknowledge that. I mean, I hate when people say Obama's token because he was president. We elected a president of the United States twice. If you took anything that's going on in America right now and went back 50 years, white people in the South would literally be having epileptic fits. They'd be like, this can't be happening. Are you kidding me? What's that woman doing on television making $100 million? What do you mean he's president? Like, what do you mean he's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff? What do you mean she's the Secretary of State? A black woman? They literally have conniption fits. They wouldn't know what to do. Like, the highest paid entertainers, they'd be like, wait a minute, where's Rock Hudson? To me, it's like, I hate when people say it's tokenism. It's not tokenism. It's actual real change. And we should be psyched and proud of it. Doesn't mean we don't have ways to go. Doesn't mean we don't have massive economic inequalities in the inner cities and stuff.
I want to see, somebody needs to make that as a short film. Somebody needs to make a short film about a guy who invents a time machine. He goes back to 1952. He goes, I'm from the future and there's a black president. And then they start dropping.
I mean, seriously. I mean, they would not. And that's how far we've come. It wasn't even a possibility. When Martin Luther King was doing his thing, could you imagine if you'd said, hey, how about if we have a 2-term black president? Would that be progress? He wouldn't go, no, that's tokenism. He'd be like, that would be amazing progress. That would be unbelievable to have the most powerful man in the world twice for 8 years be a black man.
Yes. Yeah.
But Rob, there's a greater issue at hand. I mean, there were 7 movements.
Gotta bring us down to earth, don't you, Judd? All right, go for it. What is it?
Listen, there's been 7 movements to take out the Trump presidency, right? The first one was the Electoral College. The second one was 25th Amendment. The third one was racist baby in cages. The fourth one was the Mueller report. The fifth one was the politicization of COVID. And the sixth, anyway, I lost my count. The last one was this hijacking of BLM. So you have to take the genuine issue of correcting another refinement in racism, right, through cultural revolution and cancel culture and all these reverberations. And you have to look at the repressed human nature of Americans shut down during COVID that does not stand outside. That rage was fueled. There were guys in our city saying, we're just robbing things because we just want some stuff. So there was a lot of repression happening at that moment. And then there's a lot of documentation that people did not let a crisis go to waste. And I think that's when we talk about this issue. It's like, hey, has racism deserved to move forward in cultural awareness? Sure. But has it been politicized? And it's very hard to get behind a movement that has so obviously been hijacked, politicized, used as a weapon right before the election. Come on, I mean, it's in our face.
We're in the middle of a gigantic wag the dog scenario. The media can hit a drumbeat of whatever they want. They can hit a drumbeat of whatever they want. We'll just say Trump's a Russian agent. So you've got the mainstream media and MSNBC and CNN 24 hours a day. Trump's a Russian agent. Trump's a Russian agent. And then they'll run a poll of Americans. Do you think that Trump might be a Russian agent? And then, oh my gosh, 60% of Americans, I'm making up that statistic, but then they go, wow, this is a real problem. We got to investigate. I think the exact same scenario is in play with Black Lives Matter. The numbers, the statistics don't back this up. By far and away, white people are killed by police more than black people. But you have the media going, ooh, racism is a problem. Racism is a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. And then all these people, oh yeah, racism. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. We got to do something. These are just,
right.
How about fix your own personal life? You be the best person you can be, and we'll leave the institutions to figure themselves out.
But Michael, do you not think racism in law enforcement is a problem? I mean, again, I'm not disputing your numbers of white people being killed more than black people. And I said, 100 biggest cities, 30% have black police chiefs. But most people, and I've worked in inner cities, and I've talked to a lot of black people who have money and don't have money, and cops tend to treat black people worse than they treat white people. And I don't know why. And maybe black cops do too. Maybe it has to do with poverty or where the neighborhood they're in. But too many black guys who aren't poor get pulled over for driving a nice car, and they're like, what are you doing in this neighborhood? It's not a casual thing. I mean, if you were honest, I'd ask you, would you rather be white or black and driving in a car and pulled over by the cops? Would you say black?
It's funny. I've been on both sides of it, and I guess I'd rather be white. But I was traveling in South Africa and was pulled over by a African policeman who just blatantly shook me down. He was like, "So what are we gonna do?" And luckily, the Afrikaner I was with, she's like, "We just need to give him a bribe. He's just looking for a bribe." Mm-hmm. It's terrifying. I didn't like it at all, and.
And I'm not saying racism only goes one way. I think prejudice and racism go, both directions. And a lot of the most racist people I know are well-intentioned white liberals. I always joke to every tall black guy I know. I ask the same thing. What happens when you walk down the street and white people see you and they're like, they always look strange. A lot of times they cross the street, they whatever. It's like, it's built into people's minds. Like, it's like, why did that person scare you? Like, if you're honest about it. So I'm not suggesting racism. I just think there are some systemic racist issues, and I think law enforcement's a fair place to try to address them. That's not disagreeing with your overall point that we've turned it into a wag the tail dog, whatever, wag the dog, tail wagging the dog scenario.
Yeah.
But maybe
however, I mean, I think that there's a very simple solution for all of this, and it's with the body cam. You just have the officer wear a body cam, and they don't get a say in when it's on and when it's off. When they pull someone over, the body cam comes off or turns on, and they don't have the ability to erase the footage. It's literally that simple. And that way you weed out the bad cops and you keep the good cops. And if they're pulling over all these black people who haven't committed a crime, it's just going to be obvious on the tape.
Guys, and first of all,
go ahead, Judd.
Trump immediately pivoted in a line with higher certification, more body cams. So the solution was applied. But it didn't make sense for me. And I just want to go on the record, since people can frame things as making about races. I just want to say one thing about myself. People say, "Oh, this is negligent to be a colorblind conservative." But I judge people by their character. And that I don't. Abraham Lincoln said, every man I meet is my superior in some way. And that's how I was raised as an American in the South, in a small town that wasn't inherently racist. I didn't see racism. I didn't experience it. But I grew in a small Southern town. But I just want to say how I hire. The other day I was thinking about, am I racist in any form or fashion? My last employees, I didn't even think about their race or their gender. But I had an Indian kid. I had an Islamic female. I just had a young black American kid. I just hired a guy fresh out of jail who was white. I'm hiring a Latin guy. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think once.
That's exactly what a racist would say, Judd.
Yeah, thanks. Exactly. But 70 applicants came in.
You beat me to it, Michael. You beat me to it.
70 applicants came in.
No, but that's the problem. Hold on.
And I just hired the right person.
Hold on, Judd. That's the problem. If somebody says what you said, you're labeled a racist. I'm not saying you are. I'm saying for saying that. And by the way, I'm not colorblind. I do see color, and I don't buy colorblind. And I don't think most people of color buy colorblind. I see color the same way I see gender. Doesn't mean I draw a negative or positive attachment to it, but I notice what somebody's color is, and I think that's normal. And I think most black people don't want to be seen not for being black. They want to not be seen for being black and discriminated against for that. But how do you deal with the fact, Michael, that what Judd said would immediately get him labeled a racist?
Well, it's because calling someone a racist is the perfect attack. It's the perfect thing to call someone. It's impossible to prove you're not. It's just like anything you say.
And the more you try, the more you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. The more you try to prove you're not, the more you are. The more you defend the fact that you're not a racist, the more it seems like you are going to be like, oh, see, you are. Why are you defending it?
Yeah, you can literally bring up a picture of your wife who's like straight off the boat from Kenya, and they're like, oh, so that's it's gonna be horrible. It's just awkward. It's a wonderful thing to call someone if you just want to undermine their credibility. Look at what they've done to Donald Trump, who took concrete action. He got the whole opportunity zones going. He's trying to get entrepreneurship and capitalism and cold hard cash into really ripped up neighborhoods. But somehow he's still a racist. And then Joe Biden is like, hey, if you think you're going to vote for Trump, then you ain't black. I mean, Biden says the most racist things ever. And they're like, oh, that's just Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I got to say, and in a second, I want to play this clip of this blackface thing I did on the street. I'm not in blackface, just so you know. But I want to say about Biden. I felt like what Biden said the other day about, diversity and saying Latinos have diversity, unlike African Americans with notable exceptions. They have diversity of how they think and vote and all this stuff. He didn't use the word vote. But, I read it. I listened to it. I don't care how many excuses people want to make for it. Joe Biden has consistently shown that he sees black people as uniform in how they think and look at the world. And he takes that for granted. To me, that is the epitome of, if not racism, hyper extreme prejudice. To suggest that, you all think the same. I mean, racism doesn't have to be negative in the sense that, like, you say something bad about a person. It can just be, you know what I'm saying? It can just be characterizing people by race and deciding who they are. It doesn't have to be, I'm putting you down. It can be saying, you're all going to vote for me because you're black. Like, why? So I find Joe Biden to, despite the fact he also has a history of being kind of a racist, Anita Hill, the crime bill of 94, which I've never been a fan of. But watch this clip, you guys. We'll joke about it a little. It's fun. It's about me asking people about blackface. This is before this was when blackface and Megan Fox had just gotten fired for asking the question about blackface. Are you guys familiar with the term blackface?
Yes.
Okay. As a black woman, what do you think when you hear someone did blackface?
I really don't care.
Are you not offended?
No.
Do you think they're racist?
No.
What's your thought when you hear some white person did that?
It's definitely completely wrong.
Like, you shouldn't dress up like a skin color.
I just think they're a little bit lost. They really don't understand.
So would you say it's racist?
Yeah, I think they're racist.
I think it's more they're uninformed.
I can't think of a situation where it's appropriate.
I don't think Megyn Kelly, who talked about it and then got fired.
I don't think they should have fired her for just asking the question.
Like, if you don't know it's wrong and you still do it, how responsible are you for it?
She didn't know.
Are we overly defensive about everything right now?
Yes, we are. You can't say anything. You can't do anything.
The trend we're in where someone says or does something and then they're silenced, fired, removed.
Everything you did 100 years ago is coming back. What is the world coming to?
Do you think it would help if we talked about it more instead of just being like, you're fired?
Yeah.
People do need to talk about it.
It would. It would help.
I think we need to talk about all this stuff.
I think we should talk about it, more conversation.
You need to have dialogue. You need to talk about it.
The knee-jerk reactions that you get from people and the automatic judging.
And like give the person a chance.
Whereas like in context, you can kind of see where those opinions are formed.
Wouldn't it ultimately be the way we can change people is by forcing the conversation up rather than suppressing it?
Right. You should talk about it.
So guys, that's, fun because again, the black people, and I found that in general when I talk to them, I find less black people offended by things than white people when it comes to the things around race. Maybe they're just used to it and they have a part of them just goes, whatever, those white people. But we're in a climate where talking about it is the opposite. We're not encouraging people to talk about things. We're encouraging people to only say the right thing. And you guys are in the heart of that. So as we kind of wind toward the end of this, I really want to get into where we're going and what you guys feel, because neither of you have said anything particularly offensive or stunning, but are we heading there? And Judd, for example, with you, what is something you would say beyond Trump that would get people going, like, shut him up? Because again, I believe there's room to say I'm for Trump. You're saying the algorithms will get you, but what will get like literally people hating on you? I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with COVID.
Well, I just want to go one moment. I want to say one thing. Calling people in a group bigoted, Trump supporters, just Trump supporters alone is a form of racism. It's the one hypocrisy. When people put me in a huge group and said, I want all these Trump supporters. And I said, I'm a Republican. I'm a person and I'm thinking. So one of the biggest unspoken racisms is toward Trump supporters or Republicans. And it's becoming so rationalized and it's disgusting. And you know what? I'm not buying in. I believe in America. Our system rolls from right to left. It's going to correct itself. Even if the left wins, the right wins. I'm a long view player and I forgive the people that are doing this. So the thing that will
I don't know if you're
you,
right.
Yeah, no, look.
I don't know if you're right. It's going to correct. Listen, it's up to us to correct it. It's up to everybody out there to correct it. That's my point, I guess. I don't think it isn't something we can't just lose. Michael's point about earlier, how it's sort of, we're not aware it's happening. We're just sort of, it's kind of going on. It's almost scarier because before you know it, they could pass laws saying it is illegal to say, they've already banning certain words, like taking them out of things, where it becomes a crime to speak certain thoughts.
Yeah, we're close. We're closer than we've been. And I think you are a good watchdog for that. This is a great format, and congratulations, Rob. The thing that would get us banned the most quickly now, look, it is a fact that in science that people are challenging COVID-19s, whether, hey, listen, the facts are we can't cure the cold. I got the flu at the very beginning of COVID, and they said there's 100 flus out here, and we can't cure them anyway. And vaccines only work 1 out of 30 chances on any virus. Now that was me going to the doctor. And I've done all the other research. America may have to, life, liberty, and fortune. We may have to let some people die to preserve our nation. Our security relates to our fiscal health. And so if there's one thing where I say you get banned besides that, it would say, hey, you know what? Some people might have to die to preserve the economy. We're at double the flu right now. The worst is 80. We're at 160. You know what? 500,000 may have to die before this burns out. And this vaccine has a 1 in 30 chance of working anyway. And I stand for opening America more aggressively, social distancing now, because people's lifetime savings are getting wiped out and people are dying of suicide and alcoholism, domestic abuse, a lot of other places. And so I can't hold that in.
So, Michael, I want you to jump in on this, but that's, Judd, where I think what you just said hits where the nerve goes for people, because what you said is, and I've said a version of it, maybe more tactfully to protect my, whatever, because I try to keep listeners on both sides, but said, look, people are going to die. It's inevitable. But the thing that's interesting now is when you say people may have to die, maybe it's 500,000, you immediately are going to be labeled a horrible human being. When in reality, I would argue, just being objective, we've accepted people dying for all kinds of things. We've gone to wars and said we're going to send young men and women in to die. Like, too bad you're going to die. And to be honest, Vietnam was a piece of crap war. There was no reason to send any American lives into Vietnam to die. But we did, and we justified it as like some people got to die to save the American way of life. But when you suggest people may have to die in this, in order, and good point, Judd, in order to, I've said many times, we're not looking at the cost outside of the disease. We're not looking at the suicide, the domestic abuse, the ruined lives, the poverty, the lives that will never get rebuilt. That's death too. But when you say what you said, you're immediately labeled a ultimate hater. People right now who are liberal watching you are like, what a piece of shit that guy is.
Yeah. Yeah. And Judd, that's right. That is the kind of thing where they'll just like, boop, you're gone. You're deplatformed. Oh, you're a typical Republican. All you care about is the stock market and the economy. But we've been led down this path, and there's nothing that Judd just said that I would disagree with. I think for the first time in July, suicides and drug abuse have surpassed COVID. So we're losing more people from suicide, drug abuse than from the COVID. But the media tells us this is the most important thing. This is the most important thing. We can't do anything until we solve COVID, when we literally have bigger fish to fry, much bigger their fish to fry.
The media is pretty selective, you guys, right, about how it represents this stuff. And I always find that interesting because I hate conspiracies, and yet, I'm increasingly going, is it a conscious conspiracy? Are the leaders of the social platforms, are the top execs saying, write these algorithms in? Is it something underneath that? I mean, I'm stunned by the fact that you will hear very little coverage of how many suicides there are, of how much domestic abuse there is, of how much poverty there is, of how many lives are being ruined. You'll hear very little, alcoholism, overdoses. You'll hear very little about the actual numbers, much less you'll hear very little about the breakdowns of death. Like, they don't want to report that most of the people who die are older and have underlying conditions, because that immediately, I always like to say, young people aren't going out and doing stuff because they don't give a crap about old people. Every generation's been blamed for, like, you're careless and reckless. They're going out because they don't actually think it's a threat. And they're like, my life is worth more than this. But the media will never depict that. The mainstream media.
So you have to think, like, why? Why would this be? Why are they putting attention here and not there? And I think it's very simple. It's hurting the right person. We have never seen the media flip out like they did when Donald Trump was elected for president. For 3 years, they kept this lie going. They kept this lie going that Trump's a double agent. He's working for Russia and the Mueller report. And when they were faced with the evidence that was all a lie, and they were reporting secondhand knowledge, they didn't skip a beat. They didn't blink. They didn't apologize. They went right into impeachment. And when that didn't pan out, boy, we had coronavirus just waiting in the wings.
So guys, excellent point, by the way. But as we have just a couple minutes left, so I want to kind of follow up on that. And just a comment. We're getting comments on the screen, and one of them says, "You're welcome, Rob Nelson. I was so sorry for this late reply." I guess they're referring to something I said. I'm a little behind, a little slow. No, what I want to say to what you're saying, Michael, is and Judd, what is the answer to what you just said, if it's true? Because I think a lot of people, this is why I see we're in a dilemma. I think a lot of what you said factually is true. I don't know how you can argue it's not factually true. The media ran a narrative about Trump before the impeachment stuff and up through it, and then literally dropped it when it didn't pan out, right? But when you say that's what they're doing with COVID, you immediately get yourself labeled as, as a crazy conspiracist. Like, and I don't know, how do you break that cycle? Because I think a lot of people would agree that what's happening is manipulated, but they stop short of thinking the media and politicians are literally sitting there going, let's keep COVID alive in order to hurt Trump. Do you really think they are? Do you really think Governor Newsom in California is going, let's keep the economy in a wreck as long as possible to help Trump?
Yes,
I mean, to hurt Trump?
Absolutely. And I wrote an article at my website, theloftusparty.com, how they have transcripts of meetings, city council member meetings. They're talking about if they can keep it going, and if they can keep this whole corona COVID scare going, that people who own property will be forced to sell the property for rock bottom prices. They can scoop it up for pennies on the dollar and turn it into a housing for the homeless. So the state of California is benefiting. This happened in the city of Venice. They are trying to benefit by keeping this going, to bankrupt people so they'll have to sell property.
So the other, a lesser version of that is, we got a comment on Reddit saying media loves disaster stories. They'll inflate any problem. That's the less conspiratorial view. People in power like being in power. They try to stay in power. They like being able to tell people what to do. Media likes to create disaster narratives. They like what gets clicks. Versus they're actually doing it consciously, going, we'll let this happen in order just for an actual economic or political conscious gain. You're, Michael, saying they are. I resist that only because it's a little like when people said there's a conspiracy for 9/11. Like, who can put that shit together? You really think they're sitting there going, what's that?
Are we talking about conspiracy, or are we talking about observing patterns? I mean, this is an election year. But wait, I don't think we're in a conspiracy on this element. Like Michael said, it's being openly discussed the big joke going around America is COVID's going to be cured November 5th, right? I mean, I've heard it over and over and over again. We're all
if Biden's elected, it might be.
Yeah, the political clout that we've shifted to state governments, the virtue signaling between Garcetti and Newsom to Schumer and Pelosi directly. I don't think there's even a question of whether it's politicized because it's so in the press. I mean, there are definitely end games involved. We're only 60 days away, guys. Trump was sitting on one of the most powerful economies since Reagan. So what do they have? They don't have Biden, Rob. The man is actually in some great senility and he's weak, and his VP is going to be the next president. We're all aware of that. Everyone's cognizant.
So Judd, Michael, we are really just about out of time. We got to wrap this in the next 45 seconds to a minute. So quick thought. You got 20 seconds. 2 questions. Who wins the election? Prognosticate. Judd?
I'm a groundswell guy. Look, I tracked Trump on Facebook, and I called the last election. I'm friends with Joel Pollack, who just did the red pill. I think Trump is going to come through, and I think
Michael?
that a lot of people can't take the government control.
If people have to go out and vote like we normally do, Trump wins. If it's mail-in voting, it's Biden. Biden just doesn't have the voter enthusiasm, so they're trying to make it as easy as they can for people who don't really want to go Biden.
Okay, guys, thank you for that. We're wrapping. We're out of time. This was great. I'd love to have you guys come back on, do this again.
Rob, can we put in a pitch for our show real quick? Because
yes, totally quick though. We're literally our timer's going to run out.
I just wanted to tell everybody thanks for coming. Michael and we just moved platforms to Bullet Point Nation because we were doing really well. We got shadowbaned, so we'll use tonight Bullet Point Nation on Facebook, Bullet Point on YouTube. We're on episode 70. We just started doing Bullet Point 101 interviews that Michael and I sit down with people about conservatism beside our show. Please come join and And Rob, I'm a fan of you.
Watch Bullet Point Nation. Look it up. Find the socials. Find the site, Bullet Point Nation. Even if you don't agree with these guys, my last thought here to everybody, whether you agree or disagree, now is the time to listen to viewpoints you don't agree with. That's the only way we go forward. If you're only listening to what people you agree with, and people say what you already agree with, we will go nowhere. So if you can't stand these two guys right now, go watch their show on Bullet Point Nation and fight back with your own ideas. That's what everybody in this country needs to do if we want to keep the goals we all want, because the left will regret censoring speech in the long run. Everybody, I'm Rob Nelson. This is Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching. See you on Wednesday.